We now see former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland from Canada saying that they should start a Psyop against Americans, which is completely insane.
We will make America great again.
This was absolutely insane. I seen this on another show. I thought it was fake. I had to go verify it. The fact that Christina Freeland is putting out statements saying we need to have a psyop on the American public. Yesterday, I was talking about Canadian interference in the midterm elections, as well as possibly 2028. I mean, Mark Carney's teaming up with Barack Obama, George Soros' son, as well as a lot of other big players from the Democratic Party, hiring them directly into the administration. And I had a lot of comments coming down saying, oh, yeah, right, they're going to interfere. It's coming from the horse's mouth right now. And Christina Freeland was running for PM.
And she looks like a horse as well. But from the Last Refuge says, quote, former Canadian Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says Canada must focus on psychological operations against Americans now. Those who have followed the Canadian trade squatter strategy from NAFTA through the USMCA likely know former Canadian Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland and her manipulative narcissism. Today, the purple sausage reappears from Kiev, where she is, by the way, she's in Ukraine right now, leading the Ukraine reinvestment and money laundering effort on behalf of Vladimir Zelensky.
And you can leave it there. She's not just in Ukraine, she holds one of the top positions, and that's how they're laundering money in and out of that country. And another thing I'll kind of say here, Iran, tariffs, a draft, Ukraine, you name it. They want to flood the zone right now so people don't know which way's up. They want to flood it from the Democrats, the DSA, as well as the woke right. They're trying to take over the independent media space, which Trump used to own. It's up to independent media content creators that still have their head on straight to show their support for the Republicans, for Donald Trump, and say, no, he has a good strategy. He's had a good strategy from the beginning. The war in Iran is not boots on the ground, massive war. What it is a controlled incursion where they go after the Iranians economically to break their back, and that will have a long-term effect on success for the United States.
And we've also been seeing some Canadians like Doug Ford and Olivia Chow going on US mainstream media and not being able to answer the very simple questions that they were being asked, or fully backtracking on things they said before, like they want to go to war with the US or they want to cut off energy, like Doug Ford said. And then with Wolf Blitzer said, no, I actually didn't mean it. Oops, I messed up. But now we're also seeing the American counterparts going on Canadian media, and Canadian media has no idea what to do because, once again, in Canada, they're essentially fully paid by the federal government, which makes the American counterparts look incredibly competent compared to what Canadians do when they go on their TV.
Well, Rosemary Barton looks absolutely shook in her boots. Usually she's a little pit bull attack dog, not when the Americans come in. I guess she knows her place.
Yes, because Jameson Greer was on with her. Rapid Response 47 says, U.S. Trade Representative schools the Canadian host, Rosemary Barton, saying we're doing what's right for the United States. We offered to bring Canada along, but it wasn't good enough for them. And their little narrative and their little fear factor that they've been trying to play ever since Carney walked away from this non-official trade talks that they were having is fully falling apart when they bring people like this in.
Why would Canada sign a deal without even any guarantees that you would continue to respect the deal, given that you haven't respected CUSMA?
So which deal is that we haven't respected that we've signed over the past year? Like, I'm just not familiar with that. I mean, we have made
you've added tariffs.
a dozen deals.
Yeah, you've added tariffs. I'm talking about Canada. You've added tariffs, right, above and beyond the free trade agreement, and that sort of contradicts what a free trade agreement is, of course.
So we have USMCA, and we built into it a 6-year review, because in our view, you can't just sign an agreement and never revisit it. If you have it eternally, like if I'm a business person, which we try to be in the American government, we try to think about what's good for workers, what's good for companies. You don't have an agreement that just goes on forever without ever being revisited. We have not renewed USMCA. USMCA includes specific exclusions for national security measures. And so steel, aluminum, autos, these are all national security measures for us that fall within the exclusions within USMCA. So we're doing what's right for the United States. We've offered to bring Canada along, wasn't good enough for them, and so we are where we are.
And she looked absolutely shook there. She did not want to press back whatsoever. He put her in her place. I mean, he had a million other talking points he could have gone into. He is the main trade negotiator for the United States. He could have brought up Mexico and said, well, they're in official negotiations. And when you get into official negotiations, which Canada hasn't done, you can actually build in a mechanism so you are not subject to future tariff threats as long as those negotiations are active.
And the fact that Jameson Greer had to explain that to her while she was trying to continue with the narrative that once again, because she essentially works for the state propaganda machine, she had to put out there. And that's what I've been told, that's what I've heard. And something that I continuously forget to bring up is that Canada is completely reliant on the US for military purposes. And he kind of brought it up there too, that in terms of security and being able to continue to be partners on that sense, this is also affecting it. So Canada, get your head on straight. Kirk Lubimov says, quote, cut off or tariff Canada's oil exports to the US? Horrible idea. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith does a fantastic job breaking it down, and one of the few premiers that apparently now decided to say the opposite of what she's been doing.
And we can go right into this clip. This was actually a fantastic statement. She gave it last night, and one of our viewers kept talking about it on the show, and then it popped up right after we got off air. Why don't we play it? It's absolutely fantastic. Only Danielle Smith and Jamil Javani have an alternative plan to elbows up dollar for dollar tariff. Let's destroy the Canadian economy in real time as fast as we can. Now, I might not like Danielle Smith because she's against Alberta independence, but even a broken clock is right twice a day.
And if you don't know who Danielle Smith is, she's a premier or like governor of Alberta.
Although I understand the need to respond strongly to these tariffs, I cannot think of a more disastrous policy decision than cutting off or taxing Alberta's oil to the United States. Doing so would absolutely devastate the Canadian economy. It would not only extinguish the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of Albertans, it would economically hobble our friends and neighbors in other provinces to the east. Let me explain why. And it's important that this be understood by every Canadian. If Canada were to put, let's say, at 50...
Pause it really quick, and she's going to do a fantastic job laying it all out, why you don't want to go into a tariff war with the United States, why you probably should have taken the deal. She doesn't go that far to say that, but she was having to educate other premiers like Doug Ford, the premier of Ontario, which is one of the most crucial provinces in Canada. And the fact that he was dumb to all this information, and he said that on live TV, we showed that clip yesterday, and it was absolutely jaw-dropping.
% export tariff on the 4 million barrels of oil that we export daily to the United States. The United States would immediately respond with a 50 to 100% export tariff on oil and natural gas that they export to Ontario, along with millions of barrels of diesel fuel and gasoline that Ontario and Quebec import from the Midwest. This would bring the economies of Ontario and Quebec to a grinding halt. Meanwhile, all those refineries in the United States that currently use Alberta's heavy oil would start looking to Venezuela for replacement heavy oil.
And pause it really quick. We have a story later on about Venezuela. They are opening up that market massively. They're cutting a new deal. And this has puts Canada in a really bad situation. They have even less leverage than they thought they had.
First, the pipelines northward to get it to Midwest refineries. As a result, we would lose the United States as a customer entirely and likely forever. This would result in the loss of about 500,000 jobs at a minimum, mostly in Alberta, but also hundreds of thousands of jobs in Ontario and Quebec. And if we cut off our oil entirely, what then? The same results, but even worse. The United States would, of course, respond and cut off all gasoline and diesel from their refineries to Ontario and Quebec, right as we turn into fall and winter. And unlike Canada, the United States has strategic oil reserves that Canada does not. So although their gasoline prices will increase, they will be able to keep them at relatively manageable prices, just as they have done through the Iran war. And without strategic oil reserves, Canada has no way to supply Ontario and Quebec with the oil, natural gas, and fuels that they would need in a timely fashion. The Toronto Stock Exchange would nosedive, along with millions of Canadians' investments, particularly our seniors, and small and medium and large energy companies across Canada would shutter and lay off their employees, unable to find a market for their product. There is a better way forward.
And this is exactly what the Americans have to be thinking. They know the Canadians are going to be coming back to the table, groveling. At least that's what they're thinking. And if they look at the political landscape in Canada right now, you see a couple by-elections coming up. And maybe Mark Carney is trying to get the elbows up again to win those by-elections. Or maybe there's a lot more long-term strategy. If they refuse to go back to the negotiating table before the midterms, that means he's trying to sabotage the midterms. I think they're trying to feel it out right now to see how much of an impact they can have in those midterms. But the fact that they would even try something like this close to the midterms, it's very likely Donald Trump is going to punish them, pull out of the USMCA after the midterms, and announce a bilateral deal with the Mexicans.
And in case you didn't know, and that was Premier Daniel Smith from Alberta, Alberta wants its own independence. It wants to leave Canada because it's sick and tired of all of this and of being used as a pawn, but also as a piggy bank for the rest of Canada, because it is the most productive province within Canada, which means that they end up, in a very socialist way, giving remittance payments to every single other province, most of them in the east with the biggest cash out. And Alberta Premier Daniel Smith doesn't want Alberta to become independent. She's been trying to say, oh, no, please stay. And I think this gave her a chance to show, no, we can continue to work with the US. Please, please, please don't leave. Please don't, Albertans don't get angry. Please stay. I think that's what the message she's actually giving. She's saying, I want to fight against this ridiculousness from the other premiers because this actually encourages more people to want to vote for independence.
Well, Canada has their elbows up. Alberta and Saskatchewan can see the light. They understand that their neighbors to them, their south are their best friends, and they want a deal. They don't want to go down the dark path Canada is going down, and Alberta will have a choice on October 19th to send a message to Ottawa and say, we want to be free. We want to be our own country. We want to control our own destiny and pick our own trading partners. And the trading partner that we want is the United States.
We've also been talking about the potential that this might be a plan by Carney and probably whoever is on top of him to try to disturb or interfere within the US midterms, and which is why the Canadians haven't been fully clear on what made them walk away from the table. There's no transparency there. And they came out to say that it was all because of French and the French language and the US not wanting to respect that from Quebec.
Look, when the American administration talks, especially Lutnick and a lot of these insiders, you just believe them. You can tell they're just telling the truth and they're annoyed at what happened. And he even gives a lot of examples that make a lot of sense. There is a good chance the Canadians are going to come groveling back before the midterms, after the snap elections or the by-elections within Canada.
Tablesalt says, quote, bombshell. Lutnick says Carney orchestrated the entire U.S.-Canada trade deal collapse, saying, we never uttered the word French once. I spoke to Carney twice in the 2 days before it collapsed. He scuttled the deal to help the Quebec Liberal Party beat the PQ in October.
Long, at least 10 times in the last month. I spoke to Mark Carney twice in the 24 hours before this ended. Twice. I have texts back and forth with Mark Carney. I have a long-standing relationship with him from when he worked at Goldman Sachs way back when, let alone when he was at the Bank of England. So I've known him a long time. So it's easy for me to communicate with him, right? Canada has the best trade deal in the world before we started. We negotiated, and Canada was going to have the best trade deal in the world. And what happened was that Canada walked away. We had a deal. We shook hands. The president announced it, right? Everybody was positive. Canada made the decision for political purposes. They wanted to walk away. This is politics only. If you think I ever said the words French, do I care about how the Quebecois speak?
And pause it just for a quick second. A lot of people might not know who Howard Lutnick is, but he's negotiating a lot of these tariff deals and a lot of these frameworks around the world. He's one of Donald Trump's close advisors and friends for a long, long time. So when he says something, it's important you listen.
Less to America. We don't care. So the fact is, we never brought those words up. This is manufactured, and that's why the president put out a truth saying it was a complete lie, right? It was manufactured. So there's the sovereignty party trying to run, and they're in the lead in Quebec. And so this was Mark Carney manufacturing something that would try to keep them from winning. And then you have Alberta has an independence resolution. These are elections in October. So he's making this a political thing for Canada. And my guess will be, as soon as his elections are over, you're going to see a plane full of Canadian negotiators flying down and go, come on, we'll give it to you before your election. We're just being used by them, right? That's what happened. That's why it ended. It didn't happen for math. The math was sensational. It was a great deal that we shook hands. Who sees those? Like, what is that? That's a construction product. It's a whole different category. It was never raised. These were things they put in order to make it end. You know, when someone doesn't want the deal, they make up and say, oh, I'll do the deal with you only if you wear green. And you're like,
Okay,
but I'm
and you can leave it there. And I think that is the correct short-term vision there, that Carney wants to win these by-elections and he's getting Canada's elbows up again, as well as looking at I can have a huge impact in Quebec as well as Alberta, or at least some impact in Alberta. But I think there's a midterm vision and a long-term vision. The midterm vision, if Carney wants to try to interfere in the midterms, you're not going to see negotiators go down there and try to negotiate a deal. And the long-term vision might be he wants to collapse the Canadian economy just enough to get provinces to come to the federal government for bailouts so he can offer bailouts for federalization.
Meaning he'd control, and the federal government would control even further what happens within Canada and the provinces, even more than they already do. But also, and we've been talking about this as well, that if he did want to impact the midterms, then that might be the reason why Canada's being not transparent at all with why they walked away, the reasoning, and why they're coming up with stupid things like, oh, it was a French language that they don't want to label bottles, or that they don't want to respect Quebec. And it makes a lot of sense what Ludnick is saying there as well, that might be the reason why. Thank you so much. And please don't forget to subscribe. We're trying to get to 5,000 subscribers before December. You can help us out and also like the video if you like it.